You're a loser, John. I'm filing for divorce. My wife said and left, and my parents supported her laughing at me. But 3 days later, my phone exploded with her calls. You're a loser, John. I need a successful businessman. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Do you understand? Lisa stood in front of me, her arms crossed, her expression cold and unwavering. She was wearing one of her expensive dresses, the kind I could never understand spending so much money on, but she always justified it by saying, I need to look like the kind of woman who belongs with a successful man. I guess I wasn't that man. I didn't say anything. I just stood there and let her words sink in. We've been married for 2 years, living in my parents' house, because my pediatrician's salary wasn't enough to afford a place of our own while covering all of Lisa's expenses. I always thought she understood that she was ready to build a life with me, but clearly she had been waiting for an out. She grabbed her designer purse and turned toward the door. I can't do this anymore, John. I can't live like this, waiting for you to magically become someone important. I found a real man, someone who can actually give me the life I deserve. I knew she was cheating on me. It wasn't even a secret. She barely hid it. Late nights, secret phone calls, dressing up for meetings with friends that I was never invited to. I could have confronted her, but I was afraid. Afraid that if I pushed her too hard, she'd leave. As it turned out, she left anyway. The next day, we went to sign the divorce papers. Lisa was radiant, practically glowing. I was just numb. She didn't even look back as she walked out of the office. But what really broke me wasn't Lisa leaving. It was my parents. At dinner that night, my dad took a sip of his beer and said, You should have worked harder, John. If you were making some real money, she wouldn't have left. My mother nodded in agreement. Lisa had high standards. You should have fought for her. A woman like that doesn't come along very often. Fought for what? For a woman who openly disrespected me? For someone who made me feel like I wasn't enough every single day? I wanted to yell at her, but instead I just stared at my plate, picked up my food, and let her words bounce off me like I was made of stone. The days following the divorce were a blur. I went to work, came home, and listened to my parents tell me over and over again that I was a disappointment. That if I had been smarter, richer, more ambitious, Lisa would still be here. Then on a whim, I bought a lottery ticket. I didn't even think about it. I was at the gas station, exhausted from another long shift, and I just grabbed one at the counter. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was just a fleeting hope that something would go right for once. The next morning, I looked at the numbers and my heart almost stopped. I had won $1 million. Just like that. I sat there staring at my phone screen, reading the numbers over and over again, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. My hand was shaking. $1 million. This couldn't be real. I checked the numbers again and again. I even Googled how many people falsely believe they've won the lottery every year, thinking maybe I was one of them. But every time I checked, the numbers matched. I had indeed won. For the first time in years, I laughed. Not a bitter or forced laugh, an actual, uncontrollable burst of laughter, the kind that comes from pure disbelief. The first person I called was my sister, Emily. She lived in another city, had a husband and 2 children, and was one of the few people in my life who actually cared about me. Emily, I said as soon as she picked up the phone, you're not going to believe this. Are you okay? You sound weird. I just won the lottery. $1 million. Silence. Then she burst out laughing. John, if this is a joke, I swear dash. I'm serious. I bought a ticket a few days ago. I just checked. It's real. There was a long pause, as she screamed so loudly that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Oh my God, John, this is insane. She kept screaming, asking me a million questions at once. Was I sure? Had I claimed it yet? What was I going to do? But then her tone changed. Please tell me you won't give any of it to Lisa. I smiled. She's gone, Em. We divorced 3 days ago. There was another pause, and then she let out a sigh of relief. Thank God. She doesn't deserve a cent of the money. John, this is your chance to get out. Move out of this house. Start over. Don't let mom and dad guilt you into giving them anything. I knew she was right. When I got home that night, my parents were in the kitchen arguing about something. As I walked in, my father turned to me. Where have you been? I went for a drive. I said. He scoffed. Instead of working extra shifts? Maybe if you worked harder, you'd be able to afford your own apartment. I almost laughed. If only he knew. I sat down and casually mentioned I won the lottery. Silence. They both stared at me. My mom frowned. What are you talking about? I won $1 million. For a second, no one said anything. Then my dad let out a short, incredulous laugh. Very funny. I pulled up the numbers on my phone and slid it across the table. Check for yourself. My mom grabbed the phone and stared at it. My dad leaned over and read the numbers with a furrowed brow. Then slowly, their expressions changed. First disbelief, then realization, then pure excitement. My mother clapped her hands together. John, this is amazing. My dad grinned. Well, it looks like things are finally turning around for you. And just like that, they started talking about all the things we could do with the money. Remodel the house, buy a new car, maybe even take a vacation to Europe. I sat there, letting them talk, listening to them make plans for my money as if it were already theirs. I didn't say a word. I had already made up my mind. I was done being the loser in their eyes. I let them talk. I let them dream about spending my money as if I had won the lottery for them. My dad was already listing home improvements, new kitchen, new deck, maybe even a pool. My mom was daydreaming about a luxury vacation. Neither of them even asked me what I wanted to do with it. That told me everything I needed to know. So I played along. For the next 2 weeks, I let them believe they had a say in my plans. I acted like their obedient son, agreeing when they talked about what we would buy. They were so caught up in their fantasies that they didn't notice how much I was making them do for me. Laundry, cooking, even running errands for me for once. And then, just as I expected, Lisa came crawling back. It happened one evening while I was on the couch, scrolling through apartments in another city. The doorbell rang. My mom rushed to get it, thinking it was a package or a neighbor. Then I heard her voice. Lisa, I didn't get up. I just waited, listening as she put on her best sweet, regretful tone. I made a mistake, she said. I miss John. I heard my mom practically squeal with excitement. Of course you do. He's doing so well now. He won the lottery, you know. Oh, Lisa said, feigning surprise. Wow, I didn't know. Liar. I got up and walked to the door, watching as Lisa put on her best innocent expression. She looked just as perfect as always. Hair done, expensive perfume, nails freshly done. But now I could see her for what she was. I want to fix things, she said, stepping toward me. I was stupid, John. I let my insecurities get in the way, and I didn't respond. I just let her talk, saying everything she thought I wanted to hear. She loved me. She missed me. She realized now that I was the one. I let her stay that night. I didn't argue. Didn't tell her to leave. She got comfortable, acting like nothing had happened, like she had never walked out on me. My parents, of course, encouraged it. A beautiful woman like Lisa belongs with you, my mom said. It's good that she's back. I just nodded, but I already knew exactly what I was going to do. 2 weeks later, I went to claim my money. After taxes, I walked away with $800,000. The check was in my hands. It was real. And that night, while Lisa was asleep and my parents were dreaming of their upcoming luxury lifestyle, I packed my bags. Then I woke them all up. Lisa stumbled out of bed, confused. My parents walked into the living room, rubbing their eyes. What's going on? My dad asked. I picked up my bags and slung them over my shoulder. I'm leaving. Silence. My mom frowned. Leaving to where? Away from here. I'm moving out. Lisa's face twisted. Wait, what? John, we just got back together. I smiled. No, you came back when you thought I had money. But I'm done being your backup plan. She opened her mouth to argue, but I turned to my parents before she could speak. And you too. I spent years being told I wasn't good enough, that I needed to work harder, that Lisa was some kind of prize I had to fight for. But the second I got money, suddenly I was worth something to you. I shook my head. I'm not your loser son anymore. I'm done. They all started talking at once. Lisa begging. My mom near tears, my dad angry. I didn't listen. I walked out. I drove straight to my sister's place. When she opened the door, I just said it's done. She hugged me, grinning. I'm so proud of you. That night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. The next morning, I woke up in my sister's guest room, feeling lighter than I had in years. No nagging parents. No fake apologies from Lisa. No weight of expectations crushing me. Just me, my packed bags, and a future that finally felt like mine. Emily and her husband, Mark, were already in the kitchen when I walked in. Their 2 kids were running around, laughing about something on TV. It felt warm, real, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Emily smiled when she saw me. So what's next? I'm moving, I said. I don't know exactly where yet, but I want a fresh start. Somewhere far away from all that toxicity. Mark nodded. That's the best thing you can do. You've got a rare second chance here. Use it wisely. I looked at both of them, the only 2 people who had actually supported me through all this. While everyone else either abandoned me or used me, they had stayed in my corner, no questions asked. I reached into my backpack, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. Emily frowned. What's this? $50,000, I said. For you guys. Her eyes widened. John, no. We don't. I want to. I cut her off. You were the only ones who actually believed in me. Who told me to walk away from Lisa? Who told me to move on? You never asked me for anything, which is exactly why I want to give this to you. Spend it however you want, something for the kids, a vacation, I don't care. Just take it. Emily teared up. But before she could say anything, Mark stood up and pulled me into a tight hug. Thank you, man, he said. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. Emily wiped her eyes and laughed. You're going to make me cry first thing in the morning, you idiot. We spent the next 2 days just hanging out. No pressure, no expectations. Just family. We played board games with the kids, watched movies, and talked about everything that had happened. It was the first time in a long time I felt genuinely happy. But I knew I couldn't stay forever. On the 3rd day, I packed up my bags again and loaded them into my car. Emily hugged me. Promise you'll keep in touch? Of course, I said. Mar patted my back. And don't let anyone take advantage of you again. I won't. And with that, I got in my car and drove off, heading toward my new life in a new city. A place where no one knew me, where I wasn't a loser, where I could finally be whoever I wanted to be. I drove for hours, the highway stretching endlessly in front of me. I had no specific plan, just the destination, a big, popular city in a state where no one knew my name. Where I wasn't John the loser, John the man who got left behind, or John the doormat. I was just John, and for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. When I arrived, I found a simple but nice apartment to rent. Nothing fancy, but modern, clean, and most importantly mine. No parents. No Lisa. Just peace. The first weeks were surreal. I had money in my bank account, the freedom to do whatever I wanted, yet I found myself waking up early out of habit, feeling like I had to be somewhere. I had spent years running on a schedule dictated by work, expectations, and other people's demands. Now it was up to me. I decided to take a chance. Instead of going back to being a doctor, I started looking into the commodities business, importing and selling goods. It was something I'd always been curious about, and now I actually had the capital to try it. I contacted some suppliers, did my research, and slowly started to make some moves. For the first time in my life, I was building something for myself. Months went by. My business was picking up, and I was finally starting to feel like I had escaped my past. My parents never called. probably too ashamed or bitter that I had left. Lisa, surprisingly, also remained silent. It was as if I had erased that whole part of my life. And then, because life can never be too peaceful, I got a phone call that turned everything upside down. It was Lisa. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't spoken to her in months, and I had no intention of ever doing so again. But when I saw her name flashing on my screen, I felt a sick sense of curiosity. I picked up the phone. "John," she breathed, as if we had just spoken yesterday. I said nothing. She hesitated, then finally said, "I'm pregnant." I almost laughed. Of course she was. "You're joking," I said flatly. "No, John. It's yours." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. "Lisa, we were together for 2 weeks before I left, and we both know you weren't exactly faithful before that." She let out a dramatic sigh. "Look, I know I made mistakes, but this isn't about that. This is about our baby." There it was. Our baby. I exhaled and ran a hand over my face. "And you expect me to believe that? Why?" "I'm serious, John. I wouldn't lie about something like this. If you don't believe me, take a paternity test." That was the only part that made me pause. If she was lying, she wouldn't offer it. I hated that tiny bit of doubt creeping into my mind. "I'll take the test," I finally said, "but don't think for a second that this means anything. If it's not mine, never contact me again. If it is mine, we'll talk." She agreed. 2 days later, I booked a flight back to my old town, determined to take the test and settle this once and for all. But something in my gut told me that this situation was about to get even messier than I could have imagined. The flight back to my old city felt strange. It had only been a few months since I left, but it already felt like another lifetime. The moment I landed, everything from my past came flooding back: memories of my parents' constant criticism, Lisa's betrayal, the suffocating feeling of being stuck. But I wasn't the same John anymore. Lisa had given me the address of the clinic where she had arranged for the paternity test. I didn't bother to visit my parents. There was nothing left to tell them. When I arrived, Lisa was already in the waiting room. She looked different, not in a bad way, just worn. I couldn't tell if it was the pregnancy or something else, but she didn't have that polished, untouchable look anymore. She gave me a little smile, like we were old friends meeting for coffee. "Hey," I ignored the pleasantries. "Let's just get this done." She sighed, but didn't argue. We went through the process: cheek swabs, paperwork, the usual. The nurse told us the results would be back the next day. Lisa turned to me as we were leaving. "We should talk." I shook my head. "We'll talk after I see the results." I booked a hotel for the night, not wanting to deal with anything else. Lisa texted me once, asking if I wanted to get together, just to catch up. I ignored her. I returned to the clinic the next afternoon. Lisa was already there, tapping her nails on the desk impatiently. When she saw me, she straightened up as if she had been waiting for this moment. The nurse handed the envelope to me. I opened it without hesitation. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the paper. Lisa spoke. "See? Now you know." I cut her off. "It's not mine." She blinked. "What?" I turned the paper so she could see. "It's a 0% match, Lisa. I'm not the father." For the first time, she actually looked shocked. Her face paled and her mouth opened slightly, as if her brain was trying to process what she was seeing. That's not possible," she whispered. I just stared at her. Was she serious? She grabbed the paper out of my hands, scanning it over and over, as if she could force the words to change. "No," she muttered. "No, this must be wrong." I exhaled and shook my head. "Lisa, you lied." "I didn't lie," she snapped, suddenly exasperated. "I thought, John, I swear I thought it was yours." I almost laughed. "You thought? So you had no idea?" She was silent for a long time. Then, finally, in the smallest of voices, she admitted, "I guess. I wasn't sure. Unbelievable. I come all this way for this." I stepped back and stuffed my hands into my pockets. "Well, now you are." And since there's no reason for you to ever contact me again, I'll be going. Lisa reached out as if to grab my arm, but I stepped out of reach. John, please, she said. We can still dash. No, Lisa, I interrupted. We can't. She looked like she was going to cry. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. I didn't care. I turned and walked out, leaving her standing there in the clinic, still holding the results. That was the last time I saw her. The flight back to my new town felt different, lighter, as if I had finally closed the last rotting door of my past and could move forward without anything dragging me down. Lisa was out of my life forever. My parents? I hadn't spoken to them since I left, and they hadn't contacted me. That told me all I needed to know. The only people I kept in touch with were Emily and Mark, and that was enough for me. With nothing holding me back, I threw myself into my business. It grew faster than I expected, and within months, I had doubled my initial investment. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. For the first time in my life, I was in charge, making real money, and building something of my own. Then one day, the strangest thing happened. I was in my office going over inventory numbers when an email popped up in my inbox. It was from a law firm. Subject, urgent legal matter regarding your family. At first I thought it was a scam, but when I opened it, my stomach sank. My father had died. I stared at the screen and reread the words. I didn't feel much, no sadness, no relief. Just nothing. Then I saw the second part of the email. Apparently my father had done something unexpected before he died. He had cut my mother out of his will, and he had left everything to me. I almost laughed at the irony. The man who had spent his whole life calling me a loser, acting like I was worthless, had finally given me everything. There was only one problem. I didn't want it. The house, the money, none of it mattered to me. That life was over. So I did something that would have made my father furious. I gave away every last cent of it. The house. Sold, with the money going to charity. The remaining assets? Given away. I kept nothing. My mother, of course, was furious. She tried to contact me, calling from different numbers, even having relatives send me messages demanding that I give her what was rightfully hers. I ignored each one. I had moved on. The only person I called was Emily. When I told her what I had done, she was silent for a moment. Then she laughed. That's the biggest middle finger you could have given them. Felt appropriate. I admitted. She sighed. I'm proud of you, John. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud of myself. I had walked away from everything that was trying to break me. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. I wasn't a loser. I wasn't the pathetic man Lisa had left behind. I was free, and that was worth more than any amount of money.